At the winter open house, my parents turned my 7-year-old away at the door. She had to walk home alone in the freezing dark, carrying every little gift she'd wrapped herself, and spent the evening in an empty house. When I found out, I didn't yell, I didn't call and scream. I stayed quiet, signed one paper, and 3 hours later their perfect little world began to crack. My name is Teresa. I got home late that night after a long nursing shift, expecting silence, because Cassidy was supposed to be at my parents' annual winter open house, the one they host every year, with the house packed full of relatives, games, warm food, and the sleepover she'd been counting down to for weeks. Instead, the second I opened the door, the cold hit me. Her tiny boots were lined up neatly by the entry. Her coat was hanging exactly where she always leaves it. The small bag of handmade gifts she'd been so proud of sat untouched beside them, tags still on everything, just as she'd carried it out that morning. Cassidy was sitting at the kitchen table in the same outfit I'd dropped her off in, shoulders hunched, trying to take up as little space as possible. Not crying, not making a scene. Just small. "Cassidy," I said softly. She looked up right away. "Hi, Mom. You're supposed to be at Grandma and Grandpa's." "I know." I kept my voice steady. "Why are you here?" She hesitated, then answered in that flat tone kids use when they've already practiced the words. "They said there wasn't enough room for me." I felt something inside me go still. I sat down beside her, pulled her into my arms, and held her tight while the anger started building. But I didn't let it out. Not yet. If you've ever been shut out by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, drop it in the comments. Tell me I'm not alone. And subscribe, because this one gets darker before it gets better. I held her there for a long moment, feeling the small rise and fall of her breathing against my chest. She didn't pull away, just stayed pressed close, like she was afraid to let go. Finally, I eased back a little and brushed the hair from her face. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "can you tell me what happened?" "From the beginning." Cassidy nodded, but the words didn't come right away. She picked at the edge of her sleeve, eyes fixed on the table. At 7, she wasn't great at lining everything up in order, so I had to draw it out gently, one piece at a time. "You got to Grandma and Grandpa's okay?" I asked. "Yeah." I rang the bell and Grandma opened the door. Her voice was small, careful. She looked surprised at first, like maybe she forgot I was coming. I kept my expression steady. Then what she said, the house was really full already. Lots of people inside. She told me to wait on the porch for a minute because the grown-ups were talking. I felt a twist in my stomach, but I just nodded. "Okay. How long did you wait?" "Not super long." Then Zachary came over. She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the sleeve. He saw my bag of gifts and kicked it a little, not hard but enough that it moved. He laughed and said my winter outfit looked cheap, like it didn't match what everyone else was wearing inside. Zachary, my sister Robin's son, a couple years older and always quick with a smirk. I pictured him standing there in the doorway, the light from the house spilling out behind him and no one correcting him. "Did anyone say anything to him?" I asked quietly. Cassidy shook her head. "Grandpa was nearby, but he just told everyone not to make a fuss." Then Grandma said again, "There weren't enough chairs, and it would be better if I came another time. Better if she came another time." Like my daughter was an afterthought they could reschedule. "What about the gifts?" I pressed, keeping my tone even. She said it wasn't convenient to take them right now. Told me to bring the bag home. Cassidy's lower lip trembled for the first time. I tried to hand her the one I made for her, but she just looked at it and said, "Maybe later." I swallowed hard, imagining her standing there on the porch in the cold, holding out something she'd poured her heart into, only to have it pushed back. "And your phone died." She nodded. I asked if I could use theirs to call you. Grandma shook her head and said it would just complicate things, that you were busy anyway. Busy. Right. Then Grandpa said I should walk home, that it wasn't far and the neighborhood was safe. Safe for an adult, maybe. Not for a 7-year-old carrying a bag in the dark with the wind picking up off the Oregon hills. "How was the walk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Cold, she said simply. I kept thinking someone would notice I was gone and come get me, but no one did. I didn't know the way perfectly at first because we always drive, so I had to stop a couple times to remember. My hands hurt from holding the bag. Each word landed like a weight on my chest. I could see it so clearly, her little figure hurrying along the sidewalk, streetlights flickering, every house lit up warm except the one she'd just left. The fear she must have felt, but too proud or too trained to cry out loud. When she finished, the kitchen felt quieter than before. I pulled her closer again, resting my chin on her head. You did absolutely nothing wrong, I told her firmly. You were kind. You showed up with gifts. You were polite. If anyone should feel bad, it's the people who sent a child out into the cold. She made a tiny sound, half relief, half doubt, like she wanted to believe me but wasn't sure yet. I stood up, still holding her hand. Come on. Let's get you warmed up. I made hot chocolate the way she liked, extra marshmallows floating on top, the steam rising in curls. We moved to the couch, wrapped in the same blanket, her head against my side. She sipped slowly at first, then faster as the warmth sank in. For a while, we didn't talk. I just stroked her hair and let her be. The anger was there, burning low and steady, but I kept it locked down. She didn't need to see it tonight. She needed to feel safe. Gradually, her eyelids grew heavy. The mug slipped from her fingers to the coffee table and she leaned fully into me, breathing slowing. I watched the faint tear tracks on her cheeks dry her face, smoothing out in sleep. She looked so young, so fragile, and something inside me hardened into resolve. I sat there long after she dozed off, staring into the dark, planning what came next. The house was finally still, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I stayed on the couch long after Cassidy's breathing had settled into the steady rhythm of deep sleep, her weight warm against my side. My mind wouldn't quiet down. What happened tonight wasn't some sudden cruelty. It was the culmination of patterns I'd recognized for years, patterns that ran deep in our family. Growing up, my parents always had a clear favorite. Robin, my younger sister, was the one they celebrated. She was outgoing, always ready with a story or a laugh that made everyone feel included. They'd brag about her accomplishments to relatives, hang her awards on the fridge like trophies. Me, I was the quieter one, the one who needed more time to open up. When I went through my divorce young, after Cassidy's father walked out without looking back, they treated it like a personal failure on my part. They helped once with a small check that covered barely a month's bills, and then told everyone how generous they'd been, as if that single gesture erased any further obligation. Robin played her role perfectly in their eyes. She'd send the occasional text during my hardest months, something like, "Thinking of you, hope things get better." But when I actually needed someone to watch Cassidy or help with groceries, she was always too busy with her own life. It wasn't outright hostility. It was just absence when it mattered most. She cared enough to look good, not enough to show up. Then there was Grandpa George, my mother's father, the one person who never made me feel like a disappointment. He was the steady presence in my life, the one who showed love without conditions or scoreboards. After the divorce, when I was scrambling to keep things together as a single mom working shifts, he stepped in quietly. Every month he covered part of the mortgage payment on my parents' house, the big place they loved, showing off because he wanted the family to have space to gather during the holidays. He'd slip me extra for Cassidy's needs too, never making a fuss about it. But he wasn't perfect. We'd had our share of arguments over the years. He hated how fiercely independent I became, pushing away help because I didn't want to owe anyone. There was one blow-up I still remembered clearly. He accused me of shutting people out, of punishing myself more than necessary. "You don't have to do everything alone," he'd said, voice raised in frustration. I'd fired back that relying on family hadn't exactly worked out for me. We didn't speak for weeks after that, but he never stopped the support. Eventually, we patched it up with his usual gruff apology and my quiet acceptance. He was getting older now. his legs giving him trouble on stairs, his energy not what it used to be. He lived alone in his modest home a short drive away, managing with a walker on bad days, but still sharp as ever upstairs. Cassidy adored him. He'd let her help in the kitchen, tell her old stories about when I was little, and always had time for her drawings or questions. He'd light up around her in a way that made the rest of the family's indifference stand out even more. What hurt the most was remembering how he used to talk about why he helped with the house. "So there's room for all of you," he'd say, especially around winter gatherings. Family should have a place to come together when it's cold outside. He believed in that, deeply poured his retirement savings into making it possible. Yet lately, visits to him had dwindled. My parents would call occasionally to check in, then act like that counted as real effort. Robin barely mentioned him unless it involved some future benefit. Sitting there in the dim living room, I traced those threads back further. The favoritism wasn't new. It had shaped how they saw obligations, who deserved what. They'd built their comfortable life partly on Grandpa George's generosity, treating it like something earned rather than given freely. And now that same mindset had extended to Cassidy, my bright, eager daughter, reduced to an inconvenience because she didn't fit neatly into their evening. The unfairness of it settled heavy in my chest. He'd given so much to keep the family connected, only to watch them pull away when he needed them more. And tonight, they'd used the space he helped provide to exclude the one person who still looked forward to being part of it all. I glanced down at Cassidy, peaceful in sleep, and felt a surge of protectiveness. This wasn't just about one bad night. It was about years of imbalances finally tipping too far. That surge pushed me to my feet. I couldn't just sit with it anymore. I carried Cassidy gently to her bed, tucking the blanket around her before grabbing my phone. It was later than I usually called anyone, but Grandpa George had always been a night owl, and I needed him to hear this straight from her if she could manage it. I dialed the video call, settling back on the couch as the ringtone filled the quiet room. He answered quicker than I expected, his face appearing on the screen, with the familiar background of his living room lamp glowing behind him. His eyes crinkled at first in that warm way they always did when he saw me. "Teresa," he said, voice gravelly but alert. "Everything all right?" I hesitated, then turned the phone so he could see Cassidy's empty spot beside me before explaining softly that she'd fallen asleep. But I needed to talk. He nodded, waiting patiently as I recounted the evening in simple terms, the unexpected turn at my parents' door, the way she'd come home alone. Before I finished, Cassidy stirred from the bedroom, drawn by the sound of his voice through the speaker. She padded out in her socks, rubbing her eyes, and climbed onto the couch next to me without a word. I angled the phone so he could see her fully. "Hi, Grandpa," she mumbled, leaning in close. His expression softened immediately. "Hey, kiddo. Rough night." She nodded, then said quietly, just one short sentence that hit harder than any long explanation. "I think I did something wrong. That's why they sent me away." The change in him was instant. His face, usually quick with a smile, for her darkened brows drawing together, jaw tightening in a way I hadn't seen often. He didn't interrupt or rush to comfort. He just let the words hang there, absorbing them. I filled in the few details he asked for, keeping my voice low and steady. How full the house was the suggestion she walk back on her own. He listened without comment, at first, eyes fixed on the screen, the lines around them deepening. Finally, he spoke, his tone measured, but edged with something firm. "I've helped them all these years because I thought that's what family does, keeps a place for everyone, especially the kids." He paused, glancing at Cassidy again, then back to me. "I can't accept my great-granddaughter being treated like she doesn't belong there." Cassidy shifted closer but stayed silent, watching him with wide eyes. He didn't push her to say more. Instead, he addressed me directly. "Take care of her tonight," he said. "Make sure she knows none of this is on her." "I will," I promised. He nodded slowly, the weight of the conversation showing in the way he rubbed his chin. I need to think this through. We'll talk soon. The call ended with his voice a little lower than usual, almost gruff. Sleep well, both of you. Lock up tight. The screen went dark, leaving the room quieter than before. I set the phone down and pulled Cassidy against me again, her head resting on my shoulder. She didn't ask questions. She just sighed and closed her eyes, trusting that things would feel better in the morning. I sat there holding her, replaying his words in my mind. There was no dramatic promise, no immediate threat, just that quiet resolve I knew so well from him. It was enough to ease some of the tightness in my chest, enough to let me breathe a little deeper. Cassidy's breathing evened out once more, and I carried her back to bed, lingering for a moment to watch her settle. Whatever came next, at least she had someone else in her corner who saw tonight for what it was. Back in the living room, I turned off the lights and stood by the window for a while, looking out at the empty street. The cold night air pressed against the glass, but inside things felt a fraction less heavy. Morning light filtered through the curtains, but my phone stayed silent. I'd tried reaching Grandpa George a few times already, each unanswered ring tightening the knot in my stomach a little more. He wasn't one to ignore calls, especially not after last night's conversation. Worry crept in, steadily pushing me to grab my keys sooner than I'd planned. Cassidy was finishing breakfast when I told her we were heading out to check on him. She didn't ask many questions, just slipped on her shoes and buckled in beside me. The drive to his place felt longer than usual, my grip tight on the wheel as scenarios played out in my head. His modest house looked quiet when we pulled up, no lights on inside that I could see, no movement at the windows. I knocked first, then used my spare key when there was no answer. The rooms were tidy, his walker in its usual spot but empty. A neighbor watering plants across the street caught my eye as I stepped back outside. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice casual despite the rising unease. "Have you seen my grandfather today?" She set down the hose, frowning slightly. "Early, yeah. Your parents came by in their car and picked him up. Didn't look like he was thrilled about it," kept glancing back at the house. That was all I needed. I thanked her quickly, helped Cassidy into the car, and headed straight for my parents' place. The route was familiar. The same streets Cassidy had walked alone in the cold, but I pushed the thought aside to focus on what lay ahead. Their driveway was empty except for their vehicle when I arrived. I parked and took Cassidy's hand as we walked up, her small fingers squeezing mine. I knocked hard, 3 sharp raps that echoed. My mother opened the door just a crack, at first her expression shifting to guarded the moment she saw us. "Mom," I said firmly, "where's Grandpa George?" She hesitated, then opened the door wider but stayed blocking the entry. "He's resting. It's not a good time. I need to see him. Now." My father appeared behind her, arms crossed. "Teresa, he's fine. We brought him here to keep an eye on him after he seemed upset last night." Upset last night. As if they had any idea what the call had really been about. "He doesn't live here," I replied, my voice staying level for Cassidy's sake. "You can't just take him without asking." My mother's lips pressed thin. "He's family. We're looking out for him. He doesn't need visitors stirring things up right now." Cassidy shifted closer to me, her grip tightening. I felt her trembling slightly and squeezed back reassuringly. "I'm not leaving until I hear it from him that he wants to be here," I insisted, stepping forward. My father shook his head. "Not happening. Go home." The refusal hit harder each time. I tried once more, raising my voice just enough. "Let me talk to him. 5 minutes." "No," my mother cut in sharply. "He's sleeping, and you're making a scene." Cassidy looked up at me, then eyes wide with the same worry I felt churning inside. The standoff stretched, tension thick in the air between us. They weren't budging, and every second they blocked the door fed the fear that something wasn't right. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over the screen. My parents exchanged glances, realizing what I was doing. "You're seriously calling the police?" my mother asked, incredulous. "Yes," I said calmly. I'm requesting a welfare check on my grandfather, an elderly man who may have been taken from his home without consent. I dialed 911, speaking clearly to the dispatcher. Grandpa George advanced age mobility issues, last seen being picked up early this morning by family members who are now refusing access. Possible concern he's not there voluntarily. I gave the address and stayed on the line until they confirmed officers were en route. My parents stood there, faces tightening with frustration and something close to panic. Cassidy held my hand tighter, staying quiet but close. The wait felt endless, the cold morning air biting as we stood on the porch they wouldn't let us cross. The patrol car pulled up within minutes, 2 officers stepping out and approaching the porch with calm professionalism. My parents shifted uncomfortably, my mother smoothing her sweater as if this were just a minor inconvenience. The lead officer asked a few straightforward questions: who lived here, relation to Grandpa George, reason for the call. My father tried to take control. There's no emergency. He's family resting inside. This is all a misunderstanding. The officer nodded politely but didn't back down. We still need to speak with him directly to confirm he's okay and hear of his own choice. My mother glanced at me with a mix of anger and embarrassment, then reluctantly stepped aside. The officers entered and we followed at a distance, Cassidy staying close by my side, her hand still in mine. The house smelled faintly of coffee and the lingering warmth from last night's gathering, but the atmosphere felt heavy now. Grandpa George was seated in the back living room, his walker within reach, a blanket draped over his lap. He looked tired, lines deeper around his eyes, but his gaze was clear and focused when he saw us. One officer crouched slightly to his level, speaking respectfully. "Sir, are you all right? Do you need any medical assistance?" He shook his head. "I'm fine physically." "And are you here because you want to be—" A pause. Grandpa George glanced toward my parents standing in the doorway, then back to the officer. "No. I'd like to go home." The words were simple, but they landed with finality. My mother started to protest. "He's confused. He doesn't mean." But the officer raised a hand gently, cutting her off without rudeness. "Ma'am, he seems clear-headed. We'll assist him if that's his wish." They helped him to his feet, steadying him as he gripped the walker. Cassidy let go of my hand and moved forward instinctively, taking his arm on the other side. He gave her a small, grateful smile as we all made our way out. My parents watched in stunned silence, no more arguments coming as the officers ensured he was safely in my car. The drive back to his house was quiet at first. He sat in the front passenger seat, staring out the window while Cassidy reached forward from the back to rest her hand on his shoulder. I kept glancing over, waiting for him to speak. "Thank you," he said eventually, voice rough. "Didn't expect it to come to that." "You don't have to explain," I replied softly. "We're just glad you're okay." We got him settled at home, fresh coffee, his favorite chair by the window. He seemed more himself there, the tension easing from his shoulders. After a while, he looked at me directly. "I've already contacted my lawyer this morning. We should go now, while I've got the clarity." Cassidy and I exchanged glances, but we didn't question it. The office wasn't far, a small firm he'd used for years. The attorney greeted us warmly, leading us to a conference room with wood paneling and stacks of files. He spread out documents on the table, adjusting his glasses as he addressed Grandpa George first. "We've discussed updating the will," before he began evenly. "The current version leaves the bulk to your daughter and her family, with provisions for Robin as well. Changing beneficiaries now is straightforward since you're of sound mind, but I have to warn you, disinheriting close family can lead to contests after you're gone. They might claim undue influence or question capacity." Grandpa George listened intently, nodding. "I understand the risks. I've thought about this longer than today." The lawyer turned a few pages, pointing out sections. "We can redirect everything: savings, investments, the remaining property interests to Teresa, and a trust for Cassidy's education and future. It's clean, revocable only by you while you're able." I sat quietly watching as he explained the safeguards medical affirmation of capacity if needed, witnesses present. Cassidy stayed right beside her great-grandfather, her small hand wrapped around his the entire time. She didn't say a word, just watched his face with that serious expression kids get when they sense something important. He asked a couple clarifying questions about timelines about protecting Cassidy long term. The attorney answered thoroughly, no rush, making sure everything was understood. When it came time, Grandpa George took the pen without hesitation, signing where indicated, initialing pages with steady strokes. The lawyer notarized, witnesses from the office signed, and it was done. He slid copies across the table, the weight of the moment settling in the room. Grandpa George leaned back, exhaling slowly. Cassidy squeezed his hand tighter, her eyes fixed on him, silent but present in a way that said more than words could. My phone started buzzing more than usual in the days that followed. The first real outburst came from Robin. I was folding laundry when her name lit up the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Teresa. Her voice cracked right away, thick with tears. What have you done? I stayed silent, waiting. You manipulated him. She went on, the words tumbling out between sobs. He's old, he's confused, and you took advantage. How could you turn him against us like this after everything the family has been through? I leaned against the counter, keeping my breathing even. Cassidy was in the next room, coloring oblivious for now. He wasn't confused, I said calmly. He knew exactly what he wanted. She didn't let me finish. This is about money, isn't it? You've always been jealous. Mom and Dad gave you chances, and you threw them away. Now you're stealing what's supposed to be for all of us, for Zachary's future, for the house, for everything Grandpa worked for. The accusations kept coming, layered with years of resentment. She painted me as the schemer, the one who whispered in a vulnerable old man's ear to secure a bigger share. Each claim twisted facts I'd lived with for decades. When she paused for breath, I spoke. You mean the house he paid for while you all enjoyed the space? The same space you decided didn't have room for a 7-year-old one cold night. She faltered. That was different. It was crowded, things got hectic, and sending her out into the dark alone was the solution. My tone stayed low, measured. Letting Zachary mock her clothes while you stood by, refusing to even let her borrow a phone. It wasn't like that, she insisted, voice rising again. You're blowing it out of proportion to justify this betrayal. I didn't raise my voice. It's not betrayal to protect what's right. You've all benefited from his generosity for years, taken it without question. But when it came to treating his great-granddaughter with basic decency, there wasn't room. She started crying harder, switching to please. Talk to him. Fix this. He'll listen to you. Zachary deserves no. I cut in gently but firmly. He doesn't get to decide that anymore. The line went quiet except for her breathing. Then my mother's text came through almost simultaneously, a long message full of blame, calling me ungrateful, saying I'd broken her father's heart and destroyed the family. She ended with a threat to fight it legally to prove Grandpa George wasn't in his right mind. I read it once, then set the phone down. Robin was still on the line, waiting for a response that would soften things. Instead, I said the only thing left. My daughter has learned how to stay silent from this family. Then I hung up. The phone buzzed again almost immediately. More texts, another call from a number I recognized as my father's. I let them pile up for a moment, reading the escalating anger, the shift from tears to outrage. They accused me of isolating him, of poisoning years of relationships for my own gain. I didn't reply to any of it. When the notifications became too much, I blocked Robin's number first, then my mother's, then my father's. One by one, the connections severed with a few taps. No dramatic declaration, no final message, just silence on my end. Cassidy wandered in, then holding up a drawing for me to see. I smiled, took it from her, and hung it on the fridge without a word about the phone. She didn't need to know the details yet. The quiet that followed felt different, cleaner, like closing a door that had been letting in cold air for too long. No more explanations, owed no more defending choices they'd never understood. I deleted the voicemail notifications without listening, cleared the text threads, and turned the phone face down. Whatever came next, legal threats or regret, I wasn't opening that door again. Looking back now, the change feels like a quiet revolution in our daily lives. Grandpa George moved in with us not long after everything settled, and we transformed the house to make it truly comfortable for him. Wider doorways, a new ramp at the entrance, grab bars in the bathroom, and his bedroom on the main floor so stairs weren't an issue. He grumbled at first about being a burden, but the truth was, he brought life to the place. Mornings started with the smell of his strong coffee. Evenings often ended with him reading stories to Cassidy in that deep, steady voice she loved. Cassidy blossomed in ways I hadn't anticipated. At 8 now, she carried herself differently, shoulders back, eyes brighter. She started inviting friends over without hesitation, turning the living room into a fort-building zone, or the backyard into an adventure playground. Her laughter filled the house, more often genuine and unguarded, the kind that comes when a child no longer second-guesses whether they belong. Grandpa George watched it all with quiet satisfaction, joining in when he could, teaching her card games at the kitchen table or sharing old photos that made her giggle at my younger self. He had good days and tougher ones with his mobility, but being surrounded by us seemed to ease the frustration. We kept routines, simple walks when the weather allowed, movie nights with popcorn, small traditions that built security without fanfare. As for my parents, word filtered through mutual acquaintances that they'd downsized to a smaller apartment after losing the monthly help with their mortgage. No more big gatherings like the ones they used to host, the kind where the house overflowed with people and noise. Life looked tighter for them, more contained. Robin and Zachary faded into the background too, their updates sparse and secondhand. I never sought details, and none came directly. The real shift showed in Cassidy's choices. She became selective about who she spent time with, gravitating toward friends who showed up consistently, who celebrated her without conditions. One afternoon, I overheard her telling a playmate, "Real friends make you feel like there's always room for you." She said it casually, but it stopped me in my tracks, the way she'd internalized what truly mattered. Watching her navigate that at such a young age made the distance from certain parts of our extended family feel less like a loss and more like protection. Grandpa George noticed too. He'd pull her close sometimes and say, "You've got a good heart, kiddo. Guard it well." Our home became a sanctuary of uncomplicated affection. No scorekeeping, no favoritism, just presence. Cassidy thrived in it, her confidence growing roots that I hoped would hold strong through whatever came next. In the end, that's the truth. This whole experience carved into me. Family isn't defined by blood alone. It's built in the everyday choices, the people who make space for you without hesitation, who show up when it's inconvenient, who love without keeping tally. Sometimes creating that safe circle means drawing firm lines, even with those who share your history. It's painful, but it's necessary. Cassidy taught me that as much as I tried to teach her. Seeing her choose kindness, surround herself with those who lift her up, it's proof that breaking away from what hurts can lead to something stronger. If you're facing something similar, know that protecting your peace and your child's is worth it. True family is where you're valued, not tolerated.